The containment field hummed against Marcus Chen's fingertips, a warning he'd learned to respect during his 3 months aboard the Veiled Prosperity. Beyond the shimmering barrier, the corridor stretched empty except for 2 figures approaching with that distinctive Sularian glide, feet never quite touching the deck plating. His quarters weren't locked. They were quarantined. The difference mattered more than most humans would understand. The taller Solarian stopped precisely 2 meters from the barrier. Her skin held that deep violet shade Marcus had come to associate with military service, her ceremonial sash marking her as Captain Velshara. The second figure, smaller and copper-toned, carried a data tablet that pulsed with soft amber light. Human Marcus Chen. Velashara's voice carried none of the melodic qualities he'd heard from civilian Solarians. The Queen Mother has issued a decree concerning your biological imperatives. 3 months since Earth's first contact team had been welcomed aboard this vessel. 3 months since he'd learned that humanity's desperate bid for alliance might hinge on understanding that went both ways. The Solarians had saved Earth from the Kreth invasion fleet, but their help came with observation periods, study, analysis. What kind of decree? He kept his voice steady. The copper-toned Solarian tapped her tablet. Your species exhibits mating drives that create psychological instability during prolonged isolation. The Xenobiology Council has documented 17 separate instances of your elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep patterns, and aggressive behavioral markers. The Queen Mother has determined that maintaining your mental stability serves both our peoples. You will be assigned companions. The word hit Marcus like cold water. I'm sorry, what? 2 volunteers from our population have agreed to cohabitate with you. They will provide social interaction, emotional support, and physical companionship as needed to stabilize your biology. Marcus's mind raced. The Solarians were meticulous about consent, about protocol. But the way Velshara said physical companionship suggested they'd misunderstood something fundamental about human sexuality. Or worse, they'd understood it perfectly and drawn conclusions he wasn't ready to face. I appreciate the concern, but I don't need... The containment field dropped. Velshara stepped forward, and Marcus instinctively retreated until his back hit the wall. She didn't advance further, but her presence filled the space between them. The decree is not negotiable. Your continued isolation poses risks the Queen Mother will not accept. The Kreth still hunt in this sector. We need humanity's tactical creativity. We need you functional. The copper-toned Solarian moved to stand beside Velshara. I am researcher Linshara. I will be one of your assigned companions. The second is Navigator Kesmira. We have both studied human social needs extensively. This is insane, Marcus said. You can't just assign people to... We are not people, Linshara said quietly. We are Solarian. Our social structures differ from yours. We form companionship bonds based on mutual benefit and psychological compatibility. Romance, as you understand it, is not a prerequisite for intimacy. You misunderstand your situation, human Marcus. You are not a prisoner. You are a guest whose well-being directly impacts the alliance between our species. 16 other human delegates are thriving in shared quarters throughout the fleet. You alone remain isolated. You alone show deteriorating markers.
Because I'm fine alone, Marcus protested.
Humans can handle solitude, not according to your own psychological data, Linsara countered. She turned her tablet to show graphs Marcus recognized from the mandatory health scans. Your dopamine production has dropped 42%. Oxytocin levels indicate severe social deprivation. You are not fine, Marcus Chen. You are suffering in silence because you believe it demonstrates strength.
The words struck deeper than Marcus wanted to admit.
Late nights staring at the ceiling? The weight in his chest every morning. The way he'd started talking to his reflection just to hear human speech patterns. He'd told himself it was professionalism, discipline. The kind of sacrifice the mission demanded. The Queen Mother's decree serves multiple purposes, Velshara continued. It addresses your biological needs. It allows Linshara and Kesamira to study human social bonding in a controlled environment, and it demonstrates to the Kreth that we value our allies enough to adapt our protocols for their well-being. The Kreth are watching? Marcus felt a chill. Always. They monitor all fleet communications. They will interpret your isolation as evidence that humans are expendable assets rather than valued partners. Velshara's expression didn't change, but something in her posture suggested urgency. Your cooperation is not mandatory, but its absence would be noted. Linshara stepped closer, her movements careful and deliberate. We do not expect you to perform acts you find uncomfortable. Companionship can mean many things. Conversation, shared meals, simply sleeping in proximity to others who acknowledge your existence. We will follow your boundaries. Then why make it a decree? Marcus asked. Because you would have refused a request, Velshara said simply. And we cannot afford to let you deteriorate further. Tomorrow, Linshara and Kesamira will move their belongings into these quarters. The containment field will remain deactivated. You will be free to move throughout the ship's civilian sectors. She turned to leave, then paused. The Queen Mother chose these companions carefully, human Marcus. They volunteered knowing the assignment would be challenging. Try not to make them regret that choice. The two Solarians glided away, leaving Marcus alone in quarters that suddenly felt larger and emptier than before. He sank onto the edge of his bunk, mind spinning through implications he didn't have the cultural context to fully understand. Two alien companions, a royal decree, the weight of an alliance resting on his ability to accept help he'd never thought to ask for. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled up his personal logs. The entries had grown shorter over the weeks, more terse. He'd stopped recording anything personal after the first month. Now, staring at the sparse data, he could see what the Solarians had seen. A human slowly going dark, pulling inward. Convincing himself that isolation equaled strength, the door chimed. Marcus looked up, expecting Velshara to return with more protocols. Instead, a slender Solarian with pale green skin stood in the corridor. Her eyes held a warmth the others hadn't shown. I am Kesamira, she said. I know we do not officially begin until tomorrow, but I thought you might appreciate conversation tonight. The Queen Mother's decrees can be overwhelming, especially for humans. Marcus opened his mouth to refuse, to maintain the walls he'd built so carefully. Then he saw the small container in Kesamira's hands. I brought tea, she said. Earth tea. The quartermaster kept a supply for your delegation. I thought it might help. The simple gesture, the acknowledgement that he might need something familiar, broke through Marcus's defenses more effectively than any decree. He stepped aside, gesturing her into quarters that would soon become shared space. Thank you, he managed. Kesamira's smile reminded him that companionship didn't require romance or complexity. Sometimes it just meant someone who brought tea when you needed it most. Tomorrow would bring new protocols, new boundaries to navigate. Tonight, Marcus let himself accept what the Solarians had seen more clearly than he had. That strength sometimes meant admitting you couldn't carry everything alone. That survival meant accepting help in whatever form it came. And that maybe, just maybe, 3 months of isolation had been 3 months too long. The tea was perfectly steeped, Earth standard temperature. Kesamira had done her research. As they sat in what would become their shared common space, Marcus felt the first loosening of tension he'd carried since the containment field had first activated. The Queen Mother's decree had seemed invasive, presumptuous, impossible to accept. Now, watching Kesamira carefully pour 2 cups with the precision of someone who'd practiced the ritual, Marcus wondered if the Solarians understood human needs better than humans understood them themselves. The mating urges the decree referenced weren't just about sex. They were about connection, touch, the fundamental mammalian need to know you weren't alone in the void. Linshara will arrive tomorrow morning, Kesamira said. She is very analytical, very focused on collecting data, but she is also kind, in her way. She will not intrude on privacy you wish to maintain. And you? Marcus asked. Kesamira's expression shifted to something almost playful. I am a navigator. I am trained to find paths through difficult space. I think humans and Solarians can find paths through difficult cultural space too, if we are patient with each other. Marcus lifted his teacup. To patience, then. To patience, Kesamira agreed, and to the Queen Mother's wisdom, even when we do not immediately understand it. The tea was bitter and perfect and exactly what Marcus needed. Tomorrow would bring change. Tonight, he let himself remember that humanity had reached the stars not by standing alone, but by learning when to reach back. The containment field stayed down. The barriers between Marcus and the rest of the ship, between Earth and its new allies, were falling one decree at a time. And maybe that was exactly what both species needed. Not walls. Not isolation. Just the courage to be vulnerable enough to let others in. Kesamira settled into the chair across from him like she'd always belonged there. And for the first time in 3 months, Marcus didn't feel like he was disappearing into the void of space. He felt like maybe, possibly, he was beginning to understand what the Solarians had been trying to tell him all along. You couldn't forge alliances from inside quarantine. You built them through shared tea, honest conversation, and the willingness to admit that being human meant needing others. Even when those others had violet skin, graceful movements, and decrees from queens who saw your suffering more clearly than you saw it yourself. The ship hummed around them. Somewhere in the void, the Kreth watched. But here, in quarters that would soon hold three beings from two different worlds, Marcus took his first real breath in months and let himself hope that maybe the Queen Mother's decree wasn't about control. Maybe it was about survival. The kind that required more than discipline and isolation. The kind that required trust. Linshara arrived exactly at 8 o'clock ship time, her belongings compressed into a single utilitarian container that hovered at shoulder height. Marcus had spent the night in fitful sleep, hyper-aware of Casimira's presence in the quarter's second chamber. The navigator had respected his space completely, but knowing someone else breathed within the same walls had triggered instincts Marcus hadn't realized he'd suppressed. By morning, he'd reorganized the common area 3 times. "You are anxious," Linshara observed. No greeting, no preamble, just the statement delivered with clinical precision. "I'm adjusting," Marcus replied. Linshara guided her container through the doorway and let it settle near the 3rd chamber, the one that had remained empty since Marcus's arrival. Adjustment creates anxiety, the emotion is logical. "I will require access to your biometric data throughout this arrangement. The Queen Mother's decree includes research protocols." "Research protocols?" Marcus repeated. "You mean studying me?" "Studying the interaction between species," Linshara corrected. She began unpacking with methodical efficiency. Humanity is new to interstellar politics. The Solarian Collective has navigated alliance building for 3,000 years. We have procedures, safeguards, but we have never accommodated a species with your particular neurochemistry. Casimira emerged from her chamber, already dressed in her navigator's uniform. "Linshara means that humans are complicated in ways we find fascinating. Your need for physical proximity without sexual intent. Your ability to form emotional bonds across vast cultural divides. Your tendency towards self-sacrifice that borders on self-destruction." "Good morning to you too," Marcus muttered. Casimira's expression shifted to something apologetic. "I am sorry. That was too direct for morning conversation. Would you like me to prepare breakfast?" The offer was small, domestic, utterly mundane. It was also the first time in 3 months anyone had offered to prepare food for Marcus. The human delegation ate in their quarters, alone, meals delivered by automated systems. The Solarians ate communally in vast dining halls where conversations happened in harmonic frequencies Marcus's ears couldn't fully process. "I can handle my own breakfast," he said automatically. "But would you like company while you eat it?" Casimira asked. The question hung in the air. Marcus realized this was the test. Not romance, not sex. Just the willingness to share space and meals and the small rituals that marked the difference between isolation and companionship. "Yes," he admitted, "I'd like company." That response triggered dopamine production. "I can see the shift in your thermal signature." Humans literally warm when offered social inclusion. "Is everything going to be analyzed?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Linshara said, "but analysis does not preclude care. I may study your responses, but I also wish to understand you. The 2 goals are not mutually exclusive." Breakfast was a strange affair. Casimira had indeed researched Earth food preparation, producing something that resembled scrambled eggs from the protein synthesizer. Linshara ate her own meal, a thick paste that smelled of minerals and growing things, while occasionally glancing at a data tablet that displayed Marcus's vital signs. "Your heart rate is elevated," she noted. "Because you keep telling me you're monitoring it," Marcus said. "Would you prefer I observe silently?" "I'd prefer you didn't observe at all." I could disable the visible monitoring, but the sensors throughout these quarters will continue collecting data regardless. "The Queen Mother's decree requires comprehensive records." "Why?" Marcus set down his fork harder than intended. "Why does the Queen Mother care this much about one human's sleeping patterns?" Casimira and Linshara exchanged a look that spoke of shared knowledge Marcus didn't possess. Finally, Casimira spoke. "Because 3 weeks ago, a human delegate from the science team attempted to breach an airlock. He was stopped, but the incident revealed that your species' isolation responses are more severe than we anticipated. The Queen Mother decreed that no human would remain solitary until we better understood the risks." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I didn't know." "Of course not," Linshara said. "The information was classified to prevent panic. But it is why Captain Velsara spoke of deteriorating markers, why this decree was issued with such urgency. You are not being punished, human Marcus. You are being protected from patterns we have seen before. Marcus pushed away from the table, needing space to process. A human had nearly killed themselves. And Marcus had been showing the same warning signs. The late nights, the numbness, the conviction that he was handling isolation just fine. The human in question is recovering well, Kesmira added softly. He now shares quarters with 3 Solarian companions who specialize in psychological support. He calls them his sanity squad. He is, by all metrics, thriving. And you too are my sanity squad? Marcus asked. We are your companions, Linshara corrected. The designation matters. Squad implies temporary duty. Companions implies ongoing relationship with mutual benefit. Thomas. What benefit do you get from this? Marcus turned to face them. Really? Beyond research data and following orders. Linshara tilted her head, considering. I get to understand a species that survived 40,000 years of tribal warfare and still reached the stars. I get to document how beings who evolved in competition can choose cooperation. I get to prove my theory, that human aggression is actually channeled attachment behavior. And I, Kesamira said, get to practice bridge building across the largest cultural gap I have ever navigated. Also, I find your species' capacity for hope profoundly moving. You nearly destroyed yourselves multiple times, yet you still believe in tomorrow. That is worth studying, worth protecting. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, not attraction. Not romance. Just the recognition that these 2 Solarians genuinely cared about his survival, even if their methods seemed clinical or strange. They had volunteered for this, had chosen to upend their own routines to prevent another human from reaching the desperation that led to airlock doors. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Share space. Share my life. I've been alone so long I don't remember how to be anything else. Then we will learn together, Kesamira said. Solarians also struggle with new social configurations. We are not naturally as fluid as we pretend. I propose we establish routine, shared meals, scheduled conversation periods, designated private time. Humans function well with structure, so do Solarians. We can build framework that serves all needs. It was the most practical proposal Marcus had heard since boarding the Veiled Prosperity. Not romance, not forced intimacy, just structure, boundaries. A framework where 3 beings from 2 worlds could learn to coexist without losing themselves. Excellent, Linshara replied. Then our first protocol. You will tell us when isolation impulses return. When you want to retreat, humans have tendency to hide deterioration until crisis point. We need early warning. That's asking me to be vulnerable. It is, but vulnerability is not weakness, Marcus. It is the foundation of trust, and trust is what the Queen Mother's decree is really about. Can humans trust Solarians enough to show their wounds? Can Solarians adapt protocols to honor human needs? The Alliance depends on answers to both questions. Marcus looked at these 2 beings who had volunteered to share his quarters, his meals, his strange human need for connection. Linshara, with her data tablets and thermal scans, Kesmira, with her earth tea and gentle navigation through cultural minefields. They were strange. They were alien. But they were here, and they were trying, and maybe that was enough to start with. Okay, he said. New protocol accepted. I'll tell you when I need space. But you have to tell me when I'm being too human, too messy, too complicated. Linshara's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. Marcus Chen, you are always going to be too human. That is the point. We are not here to make you Solarian. We are here to help you survive being magnificently, impossibly human in a ship designed for beings who think in harmonic frequencies and communal decision matrices. That almost sounded like a compliment, Marcus said. It was intended as observation. If it also serves as compliment, that is acceptable. Kesamira laughed, the sound like chimes in wind. Linshara is warming to you already. Usually she requires 3 weeks before offering observations that could be interpreted as approval. COVID-19, end footnote. I am efficient, Linshara protested. They fell into gentle argument about Solarian social development timelines, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Amusement. Warmth. The sense that he was part of something rather than isolated from everything. The Queen Mother's decree had seemed like invasion when Velishara first delivered it. Now, watching his two assigned companions debate with increasing animation, Marcus understood it was actually rescue. The day unfolded with surprising ease. Linsara established her research station in one corner of the common area, surrounding herself with holographic displays that tracked everything from air quality to Marcus's stress hormones. Kesamira taught him the basics of Solarian navigation mathematics, her patience infinite as Marcus struggled with concepts that bent his understanding of three-dimensional space. By evening, when they gathered for another shared meal, the quarters no longer felt like quarantine. They felt like the beginning of something Marcus didn't have words for yet. Not friendship exactly. Not family. Something in between. Something uniquely suited to three beings learning to build bridges across the void between worlds. The Queen Mother will want progress reports, Linsara mentioned over dinner. Tell her we haven't killed each other, Marcus suggested. I will tell her your cortisol levels dropped 18% today, Linsara replied. That is the progress she cares about. To progress, then. Measured in percentages and shared meals and the courage to admit we cannot survive the void alone. Marcus lifted his own glass, to the Queen Mother's wisdom, even when it comes wrapped in decrees we don't understand. Two companions, Linsara added, who volunteer for impossible assignments and somehow make them work. They drank to that. Three beings from two worlds, learning to breathe the same air and call it home. The first crisis came on day 4. Marcus woke at 3 o'clock from dreams of Earth, drenched in sweat and gasping. Not nightmares exactly, just memories so vivid they felt like fresh wounds. His sister's face, his mother's voice, the coffee shop near his apartment where he'd spend Sunday mornings reading news feeds and pretending loneliness was a choice. He sat up, trying to quiet his breathing, but the quarter's sensors were too sensitive. Within minutes, Linsara stood in his doorway, data tablet glowing softly in the darkness. Elevated heart rate. Rapid breathing. Stress hormones spiking, she recited. Do you require medical intervention? I'm fine, Marcus said automatically. Just a dream. The protocol we established requires honesty about deterioration. This is deterioration. It's just homesickness, which is deterioration for humans separated from origin points. Linsara stepped into the room, and Marcus tensed, but she didn't approach the bed. Instead, she settled onto the floor, crossing her legs in that peculiar Solarian way that suggested meditation or patience. Tell me about Earth. Because talking about home sometimes reduces suffering, because I have 17 documented cases of humans recovering from nocturnal distress through verbal processing. She paused. Also because I am curious about the planet that produced beings like you. That's the worst therapy pitch I've ever heard. I am researcher, not therapist, but I am here. And you are awake, and talking is preferable to suffering in silence. Kesamira appeared in the doorway, her sleeping robe wrapped loosely around her slender frame. I heard elevated voices. Is everything well? Marcus experienced distressing dream about Earth, Linsara reported. I am attempting conversation-based intervention. At 3 a.m? Marcus asked. Distress does not follow convenient schedules, Kesamira said. She joined Linsara on the floor. Would it help to speak of your world? We know Earth only through data files and sterile reports. We do not know what it means to you. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the genuine care in their alien faces. Maybe it was just time to stop pretending he could carry Earth inside his chest without ever letting it breathe. It smells like rain, he said quietly. Earth, when the seasons change and the first storms come. That smell of wet concrete and growing things and electricity in the air, I haven't smelled that in 3 months. Petrichor, Linsara said. The scent of rain on dry earth, caused by geosmin released from soil bacteria. Humans evolved to find the smell pleasant because it indicated water sources. It's more than that, Marcus protested. It's home. It's walking through my neighborhood and knowing every street. It's my niece's laugh. It's sitting in a park watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. It's 1,000 small things that made me human, and I left all of them behind. Kesamira shifted closer. You left them temporarily. To save them. The Kreth would have destroyed your cities, poisoned your oceans, reduced your species to scattered survivors. You volunteered to leave everything you loved so that it would still exist. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, Kesamira agreed. Sacrifice hurts. That is why it is called sacrifice. But you are not carrying this burden alone anymore, Marcus. That is what companions are for. Linshara tapped her tablet. I can adjust the quarter's environmental controls to replicate Earth's atmospheric composition. I can synthesize scent profiles that approximate petrichor. I can even modulate the lighting to match your planet's solar spectrum. That's not the same, Marcus said. No, Linshara agreed, but it is something. Small comforts accumulate into larger stability. That is also documented. Marcus looked at these two Solarians who had invaded his space, monitored his biology, and refused to let him suffer quietly. They were trying. In their analytical, sometimes awkward way, they were genuinely trying to ease a pain they had never experienced and could only understand through data points and research papers. Tell us more, Casimira urged. What else do you miss? So Marcus talked. He talked about Sunday dinners with his family, about the way his father told terrible jokes during commercial breaks, about his sister's terrible cooking and her even worse singing, about the specific quality of sunlight through his apartment windows at dawn, about the weight of Earth's gravity compared to the ship's artificial equivalent, about 1,000 small details that added up to a life he'd left behind. Linshara recorded everything, her tablet glowing with data. But she also listened. Really listened. And when Marcus described his mother's garden, Linizera mentioned that the ship's botanical bay grew earth plants. When he talked about music, Casimira revealed that she'd downloaded humanity's entire cultural database and had been studying what she called emotional mathematics, something human. Casimira hesitated. I am not certain my interpretation will be accurate. Just try. She pulled up her personal tablet, and music filled the quarters. An old jazz standard Marcus recognized from his grandmother's collection. The notes were slightly wrong, the timing off by fractions of a second, but it was human music played by someone who cared enough to try understanding it. Marcus felt tears he'd been holding for months. Just let them fall.
Linshara documented the crying with clinical precision.
Cortisol levels dropping. Respiratory rate normalizing. I'm not a data point, Marcus said between sobs. You are many things, Linsar replied. Data point is only one of them. You are also our companion, our responsibility, our chance to prove that different species can care for each other even when they do not fully understand each other. Casimira shifted closer, not touching but present. In Solarian culture, crying is private act, sacred. The fact that you allow us to witness this is gift, Marcus. We understand that. You. It's just tears, Marcus protested. No, Casimira said. It is trust. It is you showing us your wounds and believing we will not harm you further. That is the foundation the Queen Mother wanted us to build. Not romance. Not physical intimacy. Just trust deep enough to be vulnerable. The music played. Marcus cried. Linsara recorded data and Casimira maintained her vigil, and somehow the combination of analysis and care didn't feel contradictory. It felt like exactly what Marcus needed. Someone to witness his pain clinically, and someone to sit with him through it, and music that reminded him Earth still existed, still waited for his return. By the time the tears stopped, dawn light was beginning to filter through the quarter's viewports. Artificial sunrise timed to human circadian rhythms. Marcus felt wrung out but lighter. Like he'd been carrying weight he hadn't known how to set down. Thank you, he said. You are welcome, Linsara replied. I will implement the environmental modifications today. Petrichor scent profile. Earth spectrum lighting. Perhaps ambient sounds of your home region. That's not necessary. It is necessary, Linsara interrupted. Because you matter. Because your well-being impacts the Alliance. Because we have grown to care about you beyond what the decree requires. She looked uncomfortable admitting it. I do not have extensive practice with emotional declarations. But the data is clear. You have become important to me. To both of us, Casimira added. We are your companions, Marcus. That means we share your burdens, even the ones that wake you at 3 a.m. Marcus felt something shift. The decree had seemed like invasion, positively like control. But these two Solarians had transformed it into something else entirely. Partnership. Care. The kind of relationship that existed outside human categories, outside Solarian protocols, in some new space they were creating together. I miss Earth, he admitted. But I'm glad you're here. We are glad too, Casimira said. Linzaura nodded. Now rest. Your cortisol levels remain elevated. Sleep will facilitate recovery. Will you stay? Marcus asked, surprising himself. They exchanged glances. Then Linshara settled more comfortably on the floor. Casimira dimmed the lights to something gentler, and Marcus lay back down, no longer alone in the darkness. Just three beings from two worlds, learning that care transcended biology and culture and every wall they'd thought divided them. He slept. The ship hummed around them, and somewhere deep in Solarian space, the Queen Mother's decree proved itself wiser than Marcus had initially believed. Because healing didn't require understanding, it just required presence. Someone willing to sit through the darkest hours and promise, without words, that dawn would eventually come. By morning, the quarters smelled faintly of rain. Linshara's promised modifications, working their subtle magic. Marcus woke to the scent of home and the sound of his companions moving through their morning routines. The weight in his chest had loosened, not disappeared, but eased enough that breathing felt possible again. "Good morning," Casimira called from the common area. "I have prepared breakfast, and Linshara has created something she wishes to show you." Marcus emerged to find the quarters transformed. The lighting had shifted to match Earth's solar spectrum, giving everything a golden quality he'd forgotten existed. Small holographic displays showed scenes from Earth, parks, oceans, city streets, nothing loud or intrusive, just glimpses of home existing in peripheral vision. "This is incredible," Marcus breathed. "This is adequate beginning," Linshara corrected. "I will refine based on your responses, but I thought visual reminders of continuity might help. Earth still exists. You will return there. This is temporary separation, not permanent loss." Marcus sat at the table where breakfast waited. Eggs again. Coffee this time, too. Real coffee synthesized from Earth samples. Casimira had been thorough in her research. "Thank you," he said. "For last night, for all of this." "You are companion," Casimira said simply. "We care for companions." And somehow, in that moment, the Queen Mother's decree made perfect sense. Not as invasion or control, but as bridge building at its most fundamental level. Proof that different species could learn each other's pain points and care enough to ease them. That alliance meant more than political treaties and trade agreements. It meant three beings sharing breakfast while Earthlight filtered through viewports and the scent of petrichor promised that home, in whatever form, was possible anywhere. The void between stars was vast, but it didn't have to be empty. Not with companions who turned decrees into care and data points into understanding. Not with the courage to admit that humanity's greatest strength had never been standing alone. It was knowing when to reach across impossible distances and trust someone to reach back. Marcus lifted his coffee cup. "To the Queen Mother's wisdom. To companions who make wisdom work," Linshara added. "To us," Casimira finished. Building bridges one breakfast at a time. They drank to that. And in the vast network of the Solarian fleet, another report went to the Queen Mother. Not about deteriorating markers or crisis interventions, just three words that changed everything. "The human thrives.